dinosaurs and man. Two species separated by 65 million years of evolution have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea what to expect?
Hello, and welcome back to the NeoJurassic podcast. My name is Bri, and I am genuinely thrilled that you happen to join me today. As this episode intro is being recorded, the paleontological accuracy, or lack thereof, in the Jurassic franchise is once again the subject of many arguments across Twitter. You know, as I'm sure many of you can relate, it's not been easy being a fan of the Jurassic franchise and also having an interest in the realities of Mesozoic life. It's an unenviable position to find oneself in, particularly in the hellscape that is Twitter. I started this project in part with the perhaps deeply naive aspiration of gradually reconciling these two seemingly conflicting positions and their respective communities. Truth be told, I don't think I would have decided to start this podcast were it not for the vague hints from Colin Trevorrow that Jurassic would be putting forth more effort towards paleontological accuracy in Dominion and beyond. Lately, however, I've been a little concerned I may have overestimated the overlap between Jurassic fans and paleo people interested in both the scientific and storytelling possibilities of a Neo-Jurassic world. So, this week we're going to be shaking up the format a bit with a special hour-long conversation with game developer, zoologist, and paleo illustrator Tom Parker. Last year, Tom illustrated an incredible series of scientifically plausible reinterpretations of the Jurassic film's star animals. Every creature depicted in the series, from the first film all the way to Battle at Big Rock, was given a beautiful makeover that better reflects the latest in scientific accuracy. And so late last year, when I first began this Neo-Jurassic project, I knew I had to reach out to Tom for a chat. In addition to his illustration work, Tom is perhaps best known as the lead designer of the Hell Creek dinosaur survival simulator game, Saurian. The game has become a favorite of many paleo-enthusiast gamers and continues to evolve and grow as time goes on. We're just going to go ahead and dive into our conversation discussing Tom's dual degrees in both computer science as well as zoology, and how his experience in both of these fields have led to one of the most impressive dinosaur games out there today.
I actually started out doing a degree in computer science, but I decided somewhere along the path that that's not what I was into, and I would prefer to do zoology. That's always been my main passion, I guess. So I probably should have gone for that from the start, but you know how things go. So yeah, I actually have 2 degrees because I ended up finishing computer science anyway. I actually have degrees in computer science and in zoology, so I went from one to the other.
That's so you initially did computer science and then you went back and got a second degree in zoology?
Yep, that's right.
Did you have any particular focus within the field of zoology, or was it just a generalized zoology degree?
It was. My degree is just a generalized zoology degree, although my research focus, I think you could definitely argue, was in ornithology.
Uh-huh.
Although I did do stuff on paleo and stuff on crocs as well.
So archosaur oriented?
Definitely an archosaur focus.
Yeah, that would probably be mine too. I am spectacularly in love and obsessed with parrots. And birds in general, but Australia, which I've never been to, unfortunately, of course, is populated with some of the most incredible birds on Earth. I'm very, very envious of you living there.
Parrots are quite mundane for me. Obviously, they're beautiful, but
Right.
I see them often enough that
Yeah,
they're very cool though.
I love them so much. I will admit I'm more of like a New World parrot guy. I'm really into macaws. They're my favorite. But the diversity in Australia is just incredible.
Yeah, huge diversity. And yeah, they're very smart, which is what I am most drawn to about parrots, I think.
Yeah, I'm very interested in animal cognition generally, and the idea that this arboreal archosaur evolved an intelligence that's somewhat structured similarly to our own, and the social behavior and everything. I just find that so fascinating. I can never get over parrots and how what that line of evolution could hypothetically look like moving forward, and what may have evolved along a similar path at some point, maybe in the Cretaceous, that hasn't shown up in the fossil record. I'm just endlessly fascinated by that sort of idea.
Yeah, totally. And obviously, we don't really have a good handle on how intelligent stem birds were. There was probably a diversity, or almost certainly a diversity. But yeah,
Right.
it's something that is hard to tell from fossils alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, as we're going down this path of animal cognition, I feel like people are discovering that different. I mean, again, I'm a layman, so I don't have a depth of understanding of neurology. But what I have learned, if I'm not mistaken, is that different parts of the brain have evolved similar functions as our neocortex, I believe. Like as it is in our brain, the neocortex takes on the dominant part of cognition in a lot of ways. That may not be correct. I don't know. You may know better than I.
I believe that's basically correct.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I think a lot about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, Saurian is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful project. I've been completely entranced with it for the years that I've been aware of it. I'm not a big video game person, and the video games that I do play are pretty much limited to console type games. So unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity to play Saurian, but I have spent a lot of time admiring the overall design and devotion to accuracy. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's sort of my main role on the project is as the sort of science supervisor. But of course, I also do other stuff. I've been animating a lot lately.
Like animating in-game animations and such.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
How did the Saurian project get started exactly?
So, sort of a while ago, years ago, basically, there's a few different people on different parts of the internet who came up with a very similar idea, sort of in tandem, and we all kind of congregated together and it morphed into one project. That's the basic story of it. Yeah. A guy by the name of Nick Turinetti really got us started in like getting everyone together and being like, hey, if we all worked together, we could probably make this project happen.
How long ago was that?
Uh, the early 2010s. I think that was like
Okay,
2013. Yeah.
awesome. And you have the Saurian sort of like field guide book that's being released imminently, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So we initially released that ourselves. We did a self-published run. But yeah, that has since been picked up by Titan Books, so publisher in the UK, and they are putting out a hard copy version, which is it's up for pre-order on Amazon.
So what form did the book ultimately take, and what was the impetus to create such a thing?
So the idea initially was to create something for our Kickstarter backers. We wanted to create another product for them that certain people could back for at higher levels on the Kickstarter. And we came up with the idea very early to do a book that was like both a science guide to the science behind the game and a art gallery for all the art that went into the game, the concept art.
And you had a number of people basically doing the creature design and illustration for all that, right? It wasn't just one singular vision in terms of the world, building that world, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it was multiple people. It's most of the designs that ended up in the main game were done by our two designers, Chris Masner and RJ Palmer, who are both very, very talented artists.
Extremely talented,
yeah,
if I may say so.
yes, I believe so as well. Some of the designs are very collaborative, but especially the T-Rex and the Edmontosaurus and the Triceratops are all very collaborative. But yeah, most of the others were sort of designed by Chris and RJ.
Do you have a favorite critter in the game?
Yes, I do. My favorite critter for a while has been the Ankylosaurus.
I love the black and orange
Yeah,
coloration. It's beautiful, very very naturalistic but striking. It's really rad.
yeah, I think so as well. I'm very, very keen on that design. I just love how it looks. I love how the concept art looks and how the model looks.
Was it at all inspired? When I saw it, it evoked images of like newts, you know, with the black and then the vibrant orange to indicate that they're not to be f***ed with, essentially. That was kind of what I was reading into that black and orange sort of display.
Okay, so that's interesting. That concept, the idea that it would be like super colorful, especially though like we've got a really colorful tail club,
Yeah.
as like a warning that it's a dangerous animal, that was intentional.
Yeah.
But our main references for designs, rather than newts, were box turtles, actually.
Oh,
which are a
interesting.
type of really cool, colorful, interesting patterned turtle.
Oh, I love them. They're my favorite, at least North American turtle or tortoise, I would have to say.
Yeah, that's fair point. Fair choice. For me, I'd have to go with alligator snapping turtle. So I think they're just too cool to.
Ooh, that's
go
another
past.
really good one. I also wood turtles are also really up there for me, but I've never actually had much experience with wood turtles personally. But I grew up in New Jersey, and I spent most of my time like wandering around in the woods, and I would frequently come upon box turtles, and it was always just a utter joy.
Oh yeah, I bet. We always used to come across side-necked turtles or like long-necked side-necked turtles where I grew up. We said that often when it would rain, they would come out onto the road when the road was wet. So yeah, more than a few times we would like stop and pick up turtles off the side of the road to get them out of harm's way, and we'd just bring them to the dam and just put them in the dam so that they wouldn't get run over.
They're lucky they're so like the idea of a turtle, they're like the most benign of reptiles, I feel, as far as like most people go. Like people are terrified of snakes, they're frequently terrified of lizards, but somehow turtles, they're like the universally decided to be cuddly buddies, which works out well for them because they're often in peril in the road, in my experience.
Yes, I think that's true. I've noticed the same thing, is that people love turtles, even people, who are freaked out by snakes and crocodiles and such, they still love turtles.
One of my favorite things, I mean, well, this is kind of sadistic on my part, but I do often like to watch videos of people disrespecting turtles and getting, shall we say, nibbled on. It's a little perverse thing that I tend to enjoy from time to time.
Well, at least they're getting punished.
Yeah. So I'm going to dive into the Jurassic section. I'm curious what your relationship was with Jurassic when it first entered your life, and what does that relationship look like now at the tail end of 2020?
So I've always loved it. I watched it when I was very, very young for the first time, not long after it first came out. The first two movies I loved through my whole childhood, and teenagedom. I always loved those films. It's become a bit of a trend for people who are interested in paleontology online to sort of push back or fight against Jurassic Park, or some people claim they hate it.
Yes.
But
yes.
I never really went into that. I've always loved Jurassic Park.
Yeah. If I may ask, how old were you when you first saw Jurassic Park?
Probably, I'm guessing, but probably 5 or 6.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I saw it for the first time when it came out in '93. I had been obsessed with dinosaurs and animals well before that, but
Yeah.
oh my God, from that moment on, it was my everything.
Yeah, that is something for me too. Is a lot of people, on the other hand, say that they got into dinosaurs or paleontology from Jurassic Park, whereas I was already into dinosaurs and animals, and Jurassic Park I saw because of that, rather than the other way around.
Yeah. One thing that I think about often is I think about all of because Jurassic at this part is like a brand. It's like a massive sprawling brand franchise. I feel like it's moving in the direction of Star Wars as time goes on. Like people's nostalgic emotion for that original movie and everything that followed just seemed to build. And of course, at the same time, the paleo community increasingly derides the franchise for its many, many, many inaccuracies. But
Yes.
I think it's interesting that one of our biggest cultural touchstones and one of our biggest franchises is Jurassic. And for me, that's important because it's really the only major franchise that is focused on animals and science and science fiction in a way that is like deeply inherent to what the story and what the world is about. And that's, I think, really, really important as we move into this era of biodiversity collapse, extinction fest, climate change catastrophe. I think there's a power to this story of man continuously learning that it is not the that it thinks it is. It's really just part of a much larger picture. And at one time, we had organisms on this planet that rivaled us not only in intelligence in the case of the raptors, but in size and force. Like we have had the luxury of just like dominating this whole landscape since we've arrived, it feels. And I think there's something beautiful about us being aggressively put in our place across movies and television series and video games. I really enjoy it.
I have to agree with that. I find that aspect of Jurassic Park to be very cathartic. Another movie, actually, which does a similar thing, which I find very cathartic, is James Cameron's Avatar.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I actually I saw Avatar in the theater like 3 or 4 times and I was completely overwhelmed with the whole experience. And then I saw it again, not in 3D, not in a hyper immersive movie theater, and I was, kind of annoyed by much of the dialogue and some tonal things.
Yeah.
And I wasn't super into it for many years, but I've had the luxury of going to Pandora, the World of Avatar at Animal Kingdom and Disney World. And I have to say that's like my favorite. I'm a big theme park nerd. I grew up in Florida. And the Animal Kingdom is my favorite place to go to, period, other than the American Museum of Natural History in New York. That whole experience of like building an ecosystem and representing it in a theme park and tying all of these ideas and like sort of metaphors for our situation with conservation and ecological exploitation and destruction. It's just an incredible thing, and it has built such a love in me for Avatar now. Like, I'm just absolutely crazy for it, which I did not expect.
I mean, yeah, that's good to hear. I've sort of always been an Avatar defender. I understand the problems it has, and I don't think it's like a great movie.
Right.
But I think it's a good movie. I think it's underrated.
I think so too. I think that, again, the internet backlash of it being kind of like perceived as cool to on the Avatar franchise. I'm like,
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm very invested in the animal / paleo world, but I'm also almost equally, less so, but almost equally into film and television.
I'm all the way there with you, dude.
Yeah, so like I'm continuously being confronted with all of these very smug assholes, um, being real rude to Avatar, and I think it's in some ways, as you mentioned, it's warranted, but I think people are going to be really surprised when Avatar 2 comes out, and I think it's going to establish a certain amount of respect. I think moving forward.
I mean, I hope so. We'll see. It's hard to tell what's going to happen with that movie.
I hope so. So now your relationship with Jurassic, I imagine if it's anything similar to my own, and it sounds like it might be, you have a love for Jurassic, as I do. Nostalgia is no doubt part of that. But for people that love animals and love stories about man being put in its place, and people who love dinosaurs, I mean, Jurassic is huge. It's enormous. And
I mean, as you said, I'm also just into good movies, and the first Jurassic Park is just a
fucking phenomenal movie.
It's hard to argue it's not a perfect movie.
I have yet to really. I have a lot of friends that are film critics and film snobs. Almost all of them that I know are on board with Jurassic, and they're generally the first one, of course.
Yeah, I'm talking about the first one.
Yeah, regrettably, I have a lot of issues with Jurassic World. I mean, a lot, and it's hard doing this project. Like, it's very hard navigating. I've been talking to a lot of paleontologists doing this project, and so many of them have just so much loathing and fury for Jurassic, and I understand. Part of me has it too. Like, just what they've done with the stegosaurs and the pterosaurs alone, like, just like break my heart on a daily basis. But I have a certain amount of optimism moving forward with the franchise. I know, like, publicly, like they're trying to embrace the science more. They're relying more on real animals rather than imagined animals. And I know that's the direction that they're trying to go in. They're trying to embrace respect for the franchise and the animals. How do you feel about where it is and where it could go?
Yeah, so this is something I didn't mention before. You did ask what my relationship with Jurassic is like in 2020.
Yeah.
This is where I do have to say I don't think any of the sequels are good movies. Not one of them.
Yeah.
I have a lot of nostalgia for The Lost World, and I think there are some things it does well. But after that, personally, I think each sequel that has come along is worse than the last, is my opinion.
It's a feeling shared by many.
Yeah, given that I want to have optimism for Dominion and going forward, but it's hard to, given that is what I think. Maybe I'm slightly more optimistic than I was for Fallen Kingdom because that short film Battle at Big Rock they released was kind of okay. It was at least better than the previous two Jurassic World movies.
In some ways, I would agree. I actually love Fallen Kingdom.
Oh yeah, I know some people have that
I
opinion just because they love how just batshit it is. Um,
exactly.
yeah,
It's batshit, and it's really the only movie to really get into the lore of Jurassic and also simultaneously push the story in some difficult and somewhat interesting directions. You know, prior to this, everything was just trapped on an island, gotta escape kind of vibe.
that's true.
And it's a little different. And so I appreciate it. I'm sure you've seen Camp Cretaceous at this point, no?
I've seen a couple of episodes.
Oh, really? Not all of
Yeah,
it.
no,
Okay. So Camp Cretaceous, I feel, is vastly superior to any of the movies, including Battle at Big Rock, um, as far as storytelling and character goes. I think it's great. And I also think it better understands Jurassic than the movies ever did. I
that's
think. I mean,
very
the biggest
interesting.
example. Yeah, I mean, the biggest example for me, and this is something that killed Jurassic World for me, was the Jurassic Park theme is about the majesty and power and grace and alienness of dinosaurs as much as it's
Mhm.
about the wonder of man's technological achievement to revive them and bring them back. It's like a religious hymn for science and life on earth. It's like a very powerful moving thing, and the first time you're introduced to it is when you see a brachiosaurus or any dinosaur in this series for the first time, and it's a beautiful reverent moment that like really secures what this whole story and world and theme is. And then when Jurassic World comes out, that theme is used when a kid runs through a high-end hotel resort and flings open some windows to a shopping plaza with
Right,
water slides, and like that's what the music is used for. And at that point I realized that there is like a fundamental grave misunderstanding of what makes Jurassic, and that has been tangible throughout these movies. But in Camp Cretaceous, they reserve the theme for the moment when the dinosaur maniac kid is ziplining across a herd of dinosaurs at sunset. And it was the first time that I felt like it really connected to, you know, the little dinosaur obsessed kid or Jurassic obsessed kid who is experiencing this like miracle of science and human hubris. And I think that says, for me anyway, that says a lot about the tone and perspective of the films and the show. And I think the show gets it more.
right. I guess I'll have to go back and finish it. I have heard other people say similar things about it. I watched the first couple of episodes and my opinion was just like, this is very obviously for children and not for me. And I just didn't watch anymore.
It gets better. I have to say, it gets better.
Like I didn't think it was terrible or bad.
Yeah.
Even it was fine. It was just a fine show for children. Was the vibe I got.
It's definitely a show for children, but I think it has more respect for its audience's intelligence than either of the films does,
Well, that's
for
good
whatever.
to know. I don't think that either of those films has very much respect for its audience, but so it's a low bar, but sure.
So, so that's more or less where you're at, and this is a feeling that's held by a lot of people. What do you think it is about Jurassic that connected with you as a child? Like, what was it that was most fascinating, intriguing? Because throughout time, there have been so many explorations of what dinosaurs could have been. But of course, Jurassic kind of dominates that whole landscape and doesn't allow anything else to come through. So, what 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 was it about it for you? What do you think it was?
So you kind of touched on this a minute ago, but something I think the first film does that all the sequels fail at, even when they try to do it, is the wonder. Like that
Hmm.
nothing. ever in the franchise or any other franchise has compared to like that first scene with the Brachiosaurus from the first movie. That hasn't been able to be replicated again. And again, in the scene with the sick Triceratops is just so brilliantly done. The scene where they feed the Brachiosaurus later on, the Gallimimus stampede. There's so many moments in that movie. I don't know how much of it you can attribute to the acting. Like, yeah, the Sam Neill especially is just brilliant in all those scenes. But there's just this sense of like awe and wonder at the natural world, which is never replicated again, I don't think.
I don't think so. Yeah. Outside of like a David Attenborough, ironically enough, a David Attenborough documentary, you just don't access that reverence and respect and wonder anywhere else, I don't think.
Right, yeah. And that's the vibe you get.
Yeah.
Like in the Gallimimus scene where Grant is like watching the herd and he's like, oh, look at them like a flock of birds evading a predator. That's got massive like Attenborough documentary vibes. And you don't get that again. There's a bit of it in The Lost World. The Lost World tries. It doesn't quite get there.
It tries.
Yeah.
I mean, they have like the Bacher analog character, trying to give out little tidbits of information. And again, for me, I'm really interested in animal cognition and animal intelligence, and I feel like The Lost World, I mean, the novel The Lost World I love, and the film I also love, even though it's a completely different thing from the novel. But the novel, at least, was so focused on animal behavior.
It was, yeah. And I very much like the novel as well.
Oh, I love the novel. And like, again, I'm again, because of my interests, the idea of bringing back an extinct animal that, for the purposes of the story, has an intelligence that is more or less comparable to, to us. And we are left with this organism we don't know or understand anything about, that could have very well been the most dominant, like, animal line had it not been for the extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. I think that's fascinating, and I think that what the movies have all done fairly well is establish that across all of 6 of these movies, it is a story about man dealing with the fact that they brought back this animal with a very high intelligence that is aggressive and misunderstood and abused to some extent, and finding a way to coexist with each other and sort of respect one another across the films. I think that is one of the most successful elements of the movies for me personally.
Yes, I think that's present very much in the books. The first two, the first two films,
the novel, like the whole idea that the raptors were dependent on a like a culture being passed down from prior generations, like that, as a kid, that whole idea just fascinated me. Like, what did that culture that lived, like, it was passed down through generations of dromaeosaurs, like, what did that look like? What did that? And then we brought these things back, and they're essentially just like violent, confused, caged chimps with no reference for their existence. I just find that so cool and fascinating, and I wish the movies kind of leaned into that element a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that theme in the novels. I think it's one of my favorite themes in both of them, especially The Lost World is explored a lot.
Yeah. And what was you, if I may ask, and it's somewhat of a tangent, you had a focus in ornithology in your studies?
Yeah. I was actually involved in a couple of studies involving bird song, were the main studies I was involved in, which is sort of related to this bird cognition stuff.
What was that?
Bird song.
Oh, okay. Any particular bird song?
It was grey fantails with the bird we were measuring, which is a small passerine from Australia.
So I would like to talk to you about your, I mean, again, we touched on it, how you were trying to bridge this diplomatic gap with recontextualizing and bringing the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park to what that would look like if it were striving for scientific accuracy. And I thought it was wonderful, and I love it, and I'm so glad that it exists.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah. How do you think, or what would you like to see the franchise do moving forward to further embrace the reality of what these animals were?
Well, it's hard to do with the trajectory that they've headed on in the last two films, right?
Yeah.
The bare minimum they could do would be make the animals in the next one behave a bit more like animals.
Yeah.
One of the things I really, really dislike about Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom is the animals are being treated more like Marvel superheroes than they are like real animals, especially the T-Rex and the Velociraptors.
Yeah.
I really hate what they've done with the Velociraptors, with the Raptor Squad, and now this blue character who is just like a superhero who comes in to fight monsters on behalf of the humans. She's almost like a Pokemon.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I don't want it in Jurassic Park. That doesn't. It seems so opposite to what the original Jurassic Park was putting forward, where the Velociraptors are built up almost like a villain from a slasher movie. But the animals in the first one are portrayed as animals, even if they look a bit off from what we knew them at the time, and especially what we know them to look like now. They still behave like animals. And I mentioned The Lost World does some things right. That's one of the things The Lost World does really, really well, is animals that behave like animals. And I would love to see them bring that back. That's like the bare minimum of what they could do in the next one, to maybe turn around my opinions on the trajectory of the franchise a little bit. There's talk about them trying to work harder and making the animals look more accurate, which, cool. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know if they're going to change the designs they already have, or if they're going to add new designs which look better.
What would you personally, outside of them just acting like animals, as someone that has a deep love for dinosaurs and animals and Mesozoic life forms and movies and storytelling, I feel like it's a great place to allow your imagination to run wild at the intersection of those two things. So what is your fantasy moving forward of what this Jurassic franchise could be? What would you want to see and experience in this?
I mean, if it was just me in control, I would love to see them just fully embrace accurate dinosaurs. Like, it's ridiculous to think that them being accurate somehow detracts from how like cool or interesting they are. In my personal experience, the general public can't tell the difference. It's only like the weird Jurassic Park nerds who get real uppity about it. And in my experience, like, you show someone an accurate T-Rex and the Jurassic Park T-Rex like in the same colors, and that they'll be like, aren't these the same thing? Like, so if they have to do it with the lore intact, I'll be happy to see them just be like, here's another genetic company, and they've gone to the effort to make them look like they actually looked, whereas InGen did not. That's fine. That's a simple explanation. They could have. They had the opportunity to do that already in Jurassic World. Like, it's a new park with new cloned dinosaurs, right? They could have just been like, hey, we've gotten better at cloning. We don't have to fill so many gaps with other animals, so now they look more like fossil animals. Like,
I feel like that is just a symptom of the lack of understanding and respect for what was what the Jurassic franchise is and could be. I mean, just the Stegosaurus from what
yeah,
they've done from 1997 to 2015 is just like, what the
yeah, like that's right. That's the other thing is many of the designs look worse than they do in the
Yeah.
original. And I said this actually before the first Jurassic World came out and before we saw anything from it. I said, okay, I'll be fine if they don't do accurate dinosaurs. If they try really hard to make them look like the ones from the original film, and they're like, these are the animals from the original film. We try really hard to make them look like those. It's in the same canon as that universe, whatever. But they didn't do
And
that.
they don't.
They look
No.
different. Like the Triceratops looks like garbage compared to the one from the original movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Raptors look much worse. I'm quite partial to the designs in Jurassic Park 3, actually. I think from an aesthetics standpoint, they look very good. But if we say the Lost World is the peak in terms of looking like what we thought animals looked like at the time, which I think it is, if they just tried to replicate those designs from the first two movies or whatever, okay, fine, great. But they didn't do that. And all the newer animals they've introduced look pretty bad for the most part. I like the Carnotaurus, okay.
Yeah. Thank God the Carnotaurus managed to escape relatively intact. I mean, the baryonyx, the so-called baryonyx, it's so depressing. They're like, I mean, I don't know who at Universal is like, you've got this really dynamic, unique looking animal that doesn't look like anything else that's ever existed and is very alien and terrifying. Let's actually make it look like a sewer crocodile that got mutated in New York City sewer and just sort of popped out of the lava and started attacking Bryce Dallas Howard for no apparent reason. I mean, that is so depressing for me. Again, it just speaks to this lack of understanding and respect for, I mean, people are going to these movies not because they're big souped up genetic monsters, but because they somewhat represent the mysteries and the fear and beauty of extinct life forms that were real, that did exist, that no longer do.
So that's something that constantly comes up when people try to explore why people like dinosaurs. And something that often gets brought up is that they're like these weird, like alien monstery creatures that really existed. But if you make your dinosaurs unlike the ones that really existed, then you're losing that aspect. So I don't really understand what the point of that is. And yeah, you mentioned the baryonyx. One of the main features of baryonyx is those big, like, hooked claws on its hands, and they took those away.
Yeah.
That seems like that's baffling to me. That seems like ideal movie monster material, but whatever.
Totally bizarre. And like its skull is so broad. It's basically just got like a crocodile head just slapped on this scoot covered basic theropod body. It's terrible. Again, this is the type of thing I want to avoid talking about on the podcast, but invariably it just keeps coming up. I mean, I'm deeply, deeply in love with pterosaurs, especially its zarkids, and the fact that the franchise just doubled down on these like leathery winged gremlins with osprey feet. It's just so pathetic.
I've heard the argument from pterosaur workers that pterosaurs have kind of got a worse go in pop culture than dinosaurs have, which
absolutely
might be right. Like their depiction has barely changed since like the 1900s. At least
it's
crazy. At least dinosaurs got the big update in the first Jurassic Park.
Right.
The pterosaurs never really got that. They've just remained these weird, like, leathery eagle creatures.
are you a pterosaur fan?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
uh,
so have you seen the pitch trailer for when they were trying to revive the franchise in like 2011 or something, and they did a Quetzalcoatlus at the beach short film sort of thing?
no, I have not seen that.
You've not seen that? Oh
No,
wow.
I've not even
Okay.
heard of that.
Okay. It is. I mean, it isn't at all what a Quetzalcoatlus is. They basically have it as this like very fast flying like marine predator that like plucks surfers out of the water and eats them. But just the fact that they're using a pterosaur that isn't picking people up by its feet and has
Yeah,
some resemblance to what an actual animal would look like was just, and it's like my favorite prehistoric animal are the Zarkids,
I mean
was
that's
very
fair pick.
optimistic for me. What was that?
I said that's a fair pick regarding Asdarkids.
Yeah, yeah, I love them. And they even integrated in like they were calling this project Jurassic World, and in the actual logo they had a very compelling image of a tyrannosaur, a velociraptor, a man, and a Quetzalcoatlus silhouette all in the logo. And I just
Uh-huh.
thought that was such a exciting idea of like these like all of these apex predators sort of thrown together in one ecosystem, and what that's going to look like is a really cool idea, and they haven't gone in that direction at all yet, so it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I suppose I'm watching this trailer now. I just
Oh,
pulled it
you
up.
are.
Yeah. um, there's certainly it's a cool trailer. The
Yeah, yeah,
Quetzalcoatlus are
it's cool.
very. Oh, here's that logo you were talking about. Oh yeah. Oh look
Yeah.
at that. Velociraptor has feathers. Um,
Yeah, see, so like you see
yeah.
that there was a direction, and I don't know. I mean, so much of what's terrible about Jurassic World was mandated by Steven Spielberg. So,
Yeah.
I
So I've
mean, what are you
heard.
gonna
Yeah.
do? Yeah,
Right. Like, and that's actually a good time to bring up is I just don't think those two movies are very good movies. If you replaced all the dinosaurs with fully accurate 2010s dinosaurs, it wouldn't change the fact that they're bad movies. Yeah.
yeah,
um, so I don't think that's the main problem with the franchise at all. I want to make that clear. And
no,
I think we've been, I don't want to that too much.
yeah. It's very difficult, and again, I've been speaking primarily to people oriented in paleontology, so they have very strong opinions, and like it's been difficult to get anyone to not difficult, but it's a challenge to get people to see that there could be potential in this franchise to do what we would like it to do and to be better about what it's trying to do, with the paleontology people. But I have been talking to a lot of people that work with dinosaurs, and everyone has the same thing to say over and over and over again. So, but like also reaching out to people that don't work with dinosaurs and trying to recontextualize what de-extincted life forms in the Anthropocene would be like has been also difficult, because they don't really have the relationship with Jurassic, so they don't really
Right.
see the connection there. And that is really what I want to get into. I want to get into, people that are working with animals and sciences of today to recontextualize and find like smart and interesting, compelling storytelling opportunities in this whole world that this franchise has more or less ignored for action spectacle, basically.
Yeah. There's tons of untapped potential there.
Tons. So like that is kind of what my question is, like what would you like to see? I mean, I'm such a nerd. I'm obsessed with animals and the Jurassic franchise and dinosaurs and animal behavior and biotechnology, like genetically engineering more climate change resilient like corals and plants and all these things. Like we are on the cusp of a new world, and there's so much cool stuff to think about and explore there. So, I mean, do you have any like little fantasies in your mind of the potential storytelling wise of these animals and things?
Yeah, so this is probably going to be an unsatisfying answer, but
Yeah.
my general opinion is they probably should have stopped making Jurassic Park movies after the second one.
Yeah.
And I would rather see this explored from a different angle by a different franchise. I think is my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think that's completely warranted because this franchise up until now has not, given any indication that it deserves to hold these ideas and this world. But what would you think that looks like? The one that does.
It's hard to say. You could do something cool with de-extinction using like recently extinct animals. Stuff that people have actually talked about in the real world is like rewilding certain areas and bringing back things like mammoths and other recently extinct animals, thylacines, and putting them back into modern environments to try and sort of correct some of the changes that humanity made to the world. I think that'd be a really interesting concept to explore.
I have questions for you related to that, but I'm just
Yeah.
continue.
Something obviously not to that extreme, but similar happened recently here. Is they're releasing Tasmanian devils back on mainland Australia, where they've been extinct for thousands of years, to
Right.
try and fill that like a missing predator niche that we've erased as humans colonizers. So something like that would be cool. Like, yeah, if you put if you're like picked a block of land in the US and released like some mammoths and genetically engineered American lions and cheetahs and dire wolves and seeing how they interact with modern day humanity and how they brush up against human civilization would be really interesting to look at, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but also like we are dealing with so many ecological, environmental crises at the moment. Like, how much, like, what is the actual value of putting that investment into these Pleistocene animals and reintroducing them into small part of land? Like, I often think about, and this is again coming from the perspective of someone with a layman's understanding of how science essentially works, but I think a lot about the atmosphere of the Jurassic and the Cretaceous and the ratio of oxygen to CO2. And I think about like how much carbon was in the atmosphere and how much of that was locked up in Mesozoic plants and how much animals like sauropods were just like constantly in a state of deforesting whatever was in front of them, and thinking about that carbon cycle and how like maybe there's an extinct species of plant that absorbs carbon at a crazy rate and locks into it, and then you build this ecosystem with humongous herbivores that are absorbing all of this carbon via the trees that you can then reappropriate that animal to feed however large of a population. Like that's the sort of like kooky sci-fi application of de-extinction that I have been thinking about a lot as it pertains to like the crisis that we're in.
Yeah, that's quite a cool idea. I do like that. And I think something like that is like what I'd like to see if we're doing something specifically with Mesozoic animals. That would be that's cool.
And so the other thing I wanted to bring up was not related to dinosaurs, but was related to, I'm curious, you being a zoologist and one from Australia. I am from Florida, essentially, which you may or may not be aware is that whole ecosystem in southern Florida is being changed like dramatically by the
Yep.
introduction
Yep.
of reptiles from all over the world, and there are all of these invasive species just flourishing throughout South Florida. And in Hawaii, there's so many species. You have like Jackson's chameleons and gold dust day geckos and green and black dart frogs just in like Costco parking lots. It's crazy. And I'm curious what your relationship is. I feel like the Earth's ecosystems are so unstable right now, and there's so much going extinct. And then there's this exchange of animals happening all over the world that never would have happened in any other way in the past. And I think it's just like an enormously fascinating opportunity for like speciation across all these different environments.
Yeah. Well, I think it's we've destroyed the native environments that were there, right? And we're
Right.
replacing it with our own manufactured environments, whether intentionally or not. Like the situation in Australia is really very similar to Florida in terms of how the environment is, but
Yeah.
it's harder to picture for Americans because the animals that are destroying the ecosystem here are not super exotic animals like Burmese pythons
No.
and Nile crocodiles. They're
Yeah.
rabbits and foxes and deer,
Yeah.
which have just completely destroyed the environment. And we're also the something that's shared by both Australia and America is the removal of apex predators, right?
Hmm.
In America, farmers are at constant war with wolves and have displaced them from so much of the country. It's the same here with dingoes, and obviously we wiped out thylacines already.
Yeah.
And yeah, that relates to what I was talking about before, where they're reintroducing Tasmanian devils to try and fill that gap that we've made.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course, my understanding of the issue with the Tasmanian devils is there's this like very pervasive like facial cancer gene that keeps popping up in these like
Yeah,
populations
yeah,
of captive um,
yeah.
Tasmanian devils.
In the wild ones too, it's a real
Yeah,
problem. They are in real danger of extinction because of that. Very
because the
recently,
genetic pool is like at a bottleneck, right? Like
yeah,
that
it is.
gene
Yeah.
is just gonna
Um,
keep expressing.
Very recently, we've started to find solutions. I actually remember in one of my classes when I was still in my undergrad, uh, a one of our professors came in and just was super excited, and before the class even started, just had to tell the whole class about this new solution that had been found potentially to cure that facial disease in Tasmanian devils. He was really over the moon about it.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of progress being made in that department recently.
Yeah, I'm not super on top of it, but I know that there has been breakthroughs in recent years because they were in dire straits and still aren't really quite out of it.
And the Isle of Tasmania has like a pretty distinct it's like its own distinct biome from the rest of mainland Australia, right? Like you couldn't necessarily like transplant that ecosystem to the mainland anywhere. Could you really?
No, not really. Tasmania is really interesting, actually. Its ecosystem is sort of a relic of what we call the Antarctic flora, which is this uh, big, like, used to be like world, like around the whole world ecosystem that covered like Antarctica, obviously, Tasmania, New Zealand, parts of South
Yeah.
America. And New Zealand and Tasmania both are sort of relics of that ancient flora that used to exist all across the southern hemisphere.
What remains of Gondwana at that point?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some very ancient plant species in Tasmania. There's some early cypress relatives that are like right near the base of that group that still live there. Lots of podocarps, which are very, very ancient.
Mm-hmm. I have a few very tiny podocarps growing in little trays in my bathroom next to the shower.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So let me ask you the next question, which is, if you could introduce any species into the Jurassic franchise, what would it be?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. What would I like to? So there's I've got different answers based on what I want to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
If I'm trying to make the biggest impact on the public science-wise, something like Microraptor would be cool to see. I think that'd be really, obviously an accurate-looking one.
Yeah.
If I'm picking an animal, just an animal that I like for like the cool factor, I'd love to see a Megaraptoran in Jurassic Park. That would make a very cool villain, I think.
Yeah. Kind of close to what the Indoraptor ended up being, sort of, really.
A little bit. Yeah. The hands are more Death Book and less weird, creepy human hands.
Yeah. And I'm sure you fantasized about having a Mesozoic pet as well at some point as a young person that loved Jurassic and loves animals. Undoubtedly you've harbored fantasies of like some type of Psittacosaur or something cute, little dinosaurian buddy. What would your ideal Mesozoic pet be?
I would really like a mid-sized dromaeosaur, I think. I don't like it. When you say that, laymen often think like that sounds dangerous, but I don't think it would really be particularly dangerous. I'm thinking something like Tianu raptor type sort of thing. Would be really cool.
Which species?
I said Tianu raptor.
I'm unfamiliar with that one. Tell me about it.
So it's a velociraptor-sized dromaeosaur from Liaoning, which has like brilliant feather preservation on it. And we've got, I think it's cool because it's like velociraptor-sized, but it has like massive wing feathers and tail feathers and stuff, and so it's like a cool big bird. So like I'm really really into ratites, which for the listeners are like cassowaries, emus, ostriches. And so something similar to that would be cool. Like I feel like having a mid-sized dromaeosaur as a pet would be like having an emu and an eagle and a dog combined, and those
sort
are like
put together. Yeah,
three of my favorite animals. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Again, this is sort of touching upon what you had said earlier, is you'd be more interested in seeing another franchise or another form of media explore these ideas. And is that specific to de-extinction? Like you're interested in seeing like these aspects of extinct life in the frame of being de-extincted and reintroduced into this world? Is that your perspective still?
I would love to see that. I'd also love to see a franchise that just where you go back and see like a fully recreated Mesozoic ecosystem. So I'm thinking like, are you familiar with the short story A Sound of Thunder? I'm thinking, something in that sort of territory. There's another short story called A Gun for a Dinosaur, which is similar. I think something like that.
Who wrote that one?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Let me look that up. A Gun for a Dinosaur.
Do you think that the do you think that dinosaur stories without humans to sort of establish a sense of scale is as valuable as a story with humans? Do you think that sense of scale is necessary?
I think they can work. It'd be really nice if one of the old dinosaur stories we've got brought to us in its original form. So people who are familiar with dinosaur media are aware that The Land Before Time, Disney's Dinosaur, and another show from the early 2010s.
Like Dinosaur Revolution?
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah.
All three of those shows, of movies and shows, started out as like completely no narration, no voices, just these like brutal looks at like dinosaur life, sort of like full feature-length versions of the Rite of Spring sequence from Fantasia.
Yeah.
And that's the other one I was thinking of. The Walking with Dinosaurs movie was also like that. All four of those projects along the way got butchered by producers somewhere higher up in the hierarchy who were like, no, the dinosaurs need to talk or nobody's going to want to see this. So I'm still open to see a project that's like the original vision of those projects that never materialized, like a full-length version of The Rite of Spring.
As we're wrapping up here, what are you looking forward to in the future, professionally and anything else? Like what's happening with Saurian? What's happening with the book? What are you hoping to do next?
Yep. So the book is coming out soon, as we discussed. I'm excited to get that out. Saurian is still in the works, as always is. My role is somewhat minimal in that project now. I do a bit of animation. But with that sort of left to the devices of our developers, I am hoping to write more books, is my immediate plan. Yeah. So I do have a couple of books in the works to follow up I'd like to try and get the ball rolling to keep the momentum up after the Saurian one comes out.
Cool. Sweet. I can't wait to see the book. I'm very excited. I got that what are they? The books I'm talking about. They're like that Spanish duo that put out that Theropods book a couple years ago, and they just put out the Sauropods book.
Yeah.
Those have been my most recent paleo books, and I've been loving them very well.
The art in those is
the art.
Yeah.
Andre is like one of
the best working paleo artists, really.
Yeah, I love his stuff so much.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for participating in this. I'm sorry it went a little longer than an hour, but I'm very, very, very grateful for you sharing your time and thoughts with me.
No, my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about Jurassic Park.
Well, that's it for this episode of NeoJurassic. I truly hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, leave an effusively positive review on Apple Podcasts, as I understand that helps. And thank you so much for even just getting here. Until next time,